All right, welcome back to another episode of ICU Doc Talk. I think today I want to talk about medical education. What kind of my experience has been, what my opinions are about medical education in the United States, at least, where I train and practice. I think there's a lot of flaws. It's probably what I'm going to focus on with medical education. I want you to keep in mind as I talk about this that I am not an expert in medical education. I don't work in medical education, so I actually might be kind of ignorant about several things. So if you are someone that doesn't after listening to this and you think I need some correction about my views about medical education in the United States, please let me know. I would love to hear more, but let's jump into this topic. Just to be clear, when I say I don't work in medical education, I mean I don't work in like that administrative side. I work in medical education, meaning I work at a major American academic hospital, and I work with med students, residents, fellows, almost every day. So I educate, but I don't, just to be clear, that distinction. All right, so if you're not familiar, I just want to go through what medical education is in the United States, right? So it compared to a lot of Europe. So here in the United States, you have to go, you get an undergraduate degree first, and it can be in anything, right? You can get a degree in music. I got an undergraduate degree in chemistry, not because I thought it was good for medicine, but just because I liked chemistry. But you can do whatever. You can be in dance, whatever it is, whatever you'd like. And by the way, if you're listening to this, considering going to medical school in the United States, I think it's a good idea to get a degree in something that is not science-based, because it shows that you're more kind of a well-rounded person. Not that that's necessarily true. Anyway, I digress that. Anyway, so you have to get an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree at a college or university, which is generally 4 years. And it can be in anything. However, there are prerequisites that you must take to get into medical school. Some of my information might be outdated because some of the prerequisites might change because it's been some time since I tried to apply to med school. So, but usually you need to take some classes in chemistry and biology, physics. There are prerequisites to even be accepted into medical school. So whether you get a degree in dance, you need to take those courses, and you generally need to do well in them to be competitive. And then you need to take this exam called the MCAT, which has also changed since I took it last. It's a very difficult exam. It takes like 8 hours to take. I took it twice. The first time I took it, I did okay. The second time I took it, I did better. Still not like brilliant scores, but that's fine. That's another kind of, I feel like that's a bad misperception people have about medical education, that top scores, being really good on taking tests, makes you a good doctor. It absolutely does not translate. It can. It does not translate. Anyway, so you generally take this MCAT, and then you've got to do well, all that stuff. I've mentioned on a previous podcast about getting into med school and all that. And then you go to medical school, which is 4 years. And then from medical school, you do a residency, and residency can range from, it can be as little as 3 years for like internal medicine, or I believe emergency medicine or pediatrics, or it can be like 7 or 8 years if you do like neurosurgery or cardiothoracic surgery. And then a fellowship is after residency, and a fellowship is optional. Someone can do residency, and then they have to take board exams, and then they get board certified in their specialty, and then they can practice. You can go do a fellowship on top of that. It gives you extra specialization. You can get boarded in that as well, and then you can go work in a specialty or a subspecialty. That's what I did. I did a fellowship. I did a residency in anesthesiology, and then I did a fellowship in critical care. And then I'm double boarded, and I do both of those things. So that's what it is in the United States. In a lot of parts of Europe, you graduate from high school, and then you go right into medical school. You don't get an undergraduate degree. You go into medical school, and then you go into residency from there. Medical school is longer. I think it's like 6 years. Again, I'm a little ignorant on the different countries, how they do it differently. But generally, I think it's about 6 years, depending on the country, medical school, and then you go into residency, and then you come practicing. So that it's a different model of doing it. I think there's weaknesses and strengths of doing these both in different ways. I think in the United States, I think the strength that we have is you have exposure to other things, to maybe hop off the bus. Like, you know what? I don't want to do medicine. I got exposed to these other things, like this other humanities, arts, film, whatever, and I don't want to do this. It's not for me. Because I don't know about you, but when I was 19 or 20, I was really dumb. Which isn't to say you're dumb when you're that age, but what I mean by that is your foresight and your decision making about your life and planning for your life it can be highly influenced, and what you think is, the most amazing thing in the world, and you think you're destined for, 10 years later, 20 years later, you're completely wrong. So to be a high school student and decide you're going to devote your life to a career in medicine and then jump right into medical school at that age, I think some people might have a lot of problem with that. And I've talked to people that, have trained there, and I've heard that opinion as well. Now, I don't know if that's a widespread opinion. Again, I'm kind of a little ignorant of how it's done totally over there. But the flip side of it is that you get done with your medical education sooner. You're not, quote, wasting time, if you want to call that wasting time, doing other things. If you know you're destined to be a neurosurgeon or something, then that is obviously the right path for you. And congratulations. But so anyway, that's just kind of the difference between how we do it here and a lot of parts of Europe. Obviously, it's done differently in other parts of the world, and I don't know how it's done in every part of the world. That's the extent of my knowledge. All right, and then when you're in medical school in the United States, medical school is 4 years. The first 2 years is just lectures and textbooks, mostly. Maybe you do a little research right in the summer or something like that. And then the second 2 years are clinical rotations, where you're getting exposed, hands-on experience to different specialties. Okay, so there's these 4 years. Now, the first 2 years in the United States are much like undergrad. You are, as I said, you're just doing lectures and textbooks and whatever. And medical schools, time and time again, they try to come up with like new and exciting curriculum, new ways to teach. And that's fine. I'm not critical of that. Like, problem-based learning and learning in groups and getting rid of lectures and that's fine. Again, I'm not a educator. I don't understand the science of education. So I'm all for switching stuff up like that and how to learn, because I think people can learn in many, many different ways. But my point is the first 2 years of medical school are a lot like undergraduate, where you're just learning new stuff and you're just trying to put that in your brain, and testing is a lot of regurgitation. It's not all regurgitation. A lot of it is also critical thinking. But that's what those first 2 years are like. And I think it's necessary. You have to have a fundamental foundation of medical knowledge before you start on your journey of medicine. You have to understand context. And I do think that's very important. So that's what the first years. And then, as I said, the next 2 years, the third and fourth year, are clinical rotations. So there are required clinical rotations that you have to do, and then there's elective clinical rotations. And what I mean by clinical rotations is you are actually in the hospital. You're no longer like just in the medical school. You are going into the hospital, you're going into clinics, you're going to the operating room, you're going into procedures, and you're hanging out with people. Meaning, you're hanging out with very experienced doctors, you're hanging out with residents, you're hanging out with fellows, and you're getting hands-on training. And you rotate from one specialty to the next. Now, it can be a very frustrating experience as a medical student doing this, because you are, so like 1 month you're doing family medicine, where you're, in an outpatient clinic and you're seeing a bunch of patients and you're working with an attending there. By the way, an attending means a independently practicing physician. That's what attending means in the United States. So you can be on family medicine, and then the next month you're doing plastic surgery, and you're in the operating room with a completely new, set of people doing an unbelievably different field of medicine. I mean, that can't be night and day, right? The difference between family medicine clinic and something like plastic surgery. And this is what your journey through, the third and fourth year of medical school is. You're rotating from one thing to the next. You are constantly a novice, and you're constantly starting from ground zero, over and over again, every month or every 6 weeks, whatever. Some rotations are longer. You're doing OB, and then you're switching to anesthesiology, and then you're switching to, heme onc. Maybe you're doing an elective in that. And you're getting exposure to these different types of medicines, and you're learning as much as possible. And then you're getting tested throughout all this, and you're taking these board exams, which have to do with your success as a resident. Anyway, so you're hopping and skipping back and forth to all these different things, constantly resetting it, and it can be a very frustrating experience. Now, here's one of the main flaws in this process. So let me back it up. What makes a good doctor? Okay, what's the difference between a good doctor and a bad doctor? It's not your ability to take tests. That is not your ability to take exams. That is just absolutely not what makes a good doctor. So that's not even what makes a smart doctor, in my opinion. Or smart, what is, like, I know I'm getting into a more meta conversation here, but, what is intelligence? What makes someone, quote unquote smart? Is it the ability to take a test? So that's a certain type of smartness and intelligence. I would say it's the type of intelligence that society rewards, with financial and status and all that. It's a type of intelligence that's easily rewarded by our society. But is that what intelligence is? The ability to game an exam? Maybe game an exam is the wrong answer, is the wrong way to word it. But why is someone arrived to the point where they're able to do really well on an exam? Well, okay, they might have some baseline intelligence, but their mind has been developed in such a way that they're able to interface with that exam in a very positive way and understand what the test takers are trying to ask them and trying to get to the right answer. Because that's what test taking is you're getting to you're understanding what the test takers are doing, right? You can study for an exam and you can do well on that exam. Here's my point. So when you go through these rotations, you're getting evaluated by people in these rotations in your third and fourth year of medical school. You're getting evaluated based on just extremely subjective measures. Like, oh, okay, this medical student, they were not enthusiastic. So, and that'll affect your grade as a med student. Okay, they weren't enthusiastic because they didn't act like a cheerleader when they showed up every day, or they had a bad attitude, which is a highly subjective thing, right? That's a highly cultural thing. Oh, they had a bad attitude. Like, did they really have a bad attitude, or are they from a different culture than you? And maybe their bad attitude is you just don't understand how someone expresses attitude from the culture that person comes from. My point is, it's highly subjective. So you get evaluated by residents and fellows and attendings with these these micro interactions throughout that month that you're on a clinical rotation, getting a tiny window into how someone's performing. What is that performance even? Performance is a good word. It's performative. You're not really. Someone can easily game this system to get good grades, to get good evaluations, and they can graduate and be an absolute disaster of a physician. That's kind of my point that I'm getting at. And now at the same time that you're doing these clinical rotations, you're paying an American medical school a lot of money, right? So my student loans, I took out like $350,000 just for medical school. So you're doing your third and fourth year of medical school, you're paying tuition, and these people that are teaching you are not getting paid to teach you. And the facilities that you're using, your tuition have nothing to do with a hospital existing or that clinic existing or patients coming in. So where exactly is your tuition going? Why are you paying, for this moment, for this third and fourth year of medical school, where literally the infrastructure and the people that are teaching your education, your tuition is not going towards any of that. Basically for 2 years straight, your third and fourth year of medical school, very little of your tuition is going towards your education. So I don't know how to square that. Now, I'm not in administration. I'm not in a medical school administration. So maybe I'm just not seeing all of that. Maybe I'm just ignorant of things, of where, tuition money actually goes. But I remember being a third and fourth year medical student. I'm like, why am I paying tuition to show up to this 6 weeks of surgical rotation to a bunch of unenthused residents that are trainees themselves, and an attending that I barely see, or who I see in the operating who just yells at me because I'm not cutting the knot the right way because I have no idea what I'm doing because I'm a idiot med student. Why am I paying tuition for this? And then I'm getting evaluated based on extremely subjective criteria, and these evaluations affect my future as a physician and the residency that I'm ultimately going to get into. So you see it's a little like what? It's like informal. You're basically paying a bunch of tuition for very informal training, highly subjective, highly scattered, a shotgun approach to education. And this is what third and fourth year medical school is like in the United States. And then furthermore, your fourth year of medical school, about half of that is used to interview for residency. So you are booking trips. Your residency is highly competitive, and some residencies are even more competitive than other residencies, right? If you want to get into like radiation oncology or dermatology or neurosurgery, that's extremely competitive. So you are booking a ton of interviews at a ton of places, because you're trying to maximize your chances of getting into just a single residency. So sometimes, some medical students are going on 30, 40 interviews, literally flying. Well, maybe pre-pandemic. Now interviews are done remotely, but maybe they're loosening up now. I'm not really sure. But you're going out on all these interviews. You're not in school doing that. You have to pay for all those things yourself. I had to take out an extra private loan just to pay. Like I took out an extra $20,000 on top of my medical school tuition just to go on interviews to get into anesthesia residency. And then you're not getting educated during that. Seriously, a medical student can take 6 months, 4 or 5, 6 months of their 4th year of medical school going on interviews. That's not education. That I don't know what that is. And again, why is someone paying? I know I'm sounding whining at this point. I'm not like bitter about it. I'm very grateful for, to my medical school and all that. So I hope I'm not coming off too bitter. I'm honestly not bitter. I'm just kind of asking these questions because it's like, why is this the system that we have? Why do we spend almost nearly half of our 4th year of medical school interviewing for residency, and we're not actually getting an education, and we're paying tuition for that, a lot of tuition for that. And then for your medical school a few years later to then ask for donations to the school. It's like, I'm not doing that. Why did I pay you so much tuition to begin with? Okay, I guess I'm a little bitter. No, I'm joking. Okay, so, med school, that's kind of, an experience that someone can have through med school. It's kind of a shotgun approach where your education is really kind of all over the place, and it's highly subjective to your experience, highly subjective to the med school you go to. And then you go to intern. You go to residency, and everybody does an intern year, right? That's what an intern means. It means you've graduated from medical school. You technically have a medical degree, but you're a first year, and you're still a trainee, and you very much do not know how to be a doctor when you start out as an intern. Very much so. I'll just when you're in medical school, you're barely even understanding what medicine even is. Obviously, you have a good grasp, more than the average person, but it's when you're an intern, from my personal experience, that is the biggest growth. Some of the biggest growth you have in your career is when you're an intern. That 1 year, your growth is exponential. That is where you actually learn how to be a doctor. It is not in medical school. You do not, I just want to make that very clear. You do not know how to be a doctor. You do not learn how to be a doctor in medical school. You learn the science of the medicine. You learn you learn the pharmacology and the physiology. You learn all of those things. And then you get exposed to different medical fields to decide what you want to go into. It is an intern year. That's where you decide to be a physician. And this kind of harkens back to it's not your test scores that dictate how well you're going to be as an intern. It's honestly, it's your leadership skills. It's how you're able to talk with patients. It's how you're able to act interprofessionally with nurses, with other staff. How are you able to deliver timely and good patient care in a collaborative effort? That is what being a physician is. And you don't learn those skills just by going through medical school. You don't. Medical schools need to be highly selective with who they pick to go into medicine for people that have those attributes, in my opinion. This is why you will hear about it every now and then, people that have brilliant MCAT scores or grades or whatever, and they don't get into a single medical school. Now, it's not a judgment about that person. Obviously, it's someone who's very smart, who is very good at test taking. But clearly, a person like that, if you had very good scores, you would get invited to a lot of medical school interviews, presumably. And that person probably does not interview well. And there's a reason that medical schools chose to not, matriculate that person into medical school. And it's probably because they are not very good with, for lack of better words, they're not very good at, personal skill, interpersonal skills, speaking with people, leading a team. They don't maybe naturally, I don't know if that's a natural talent. I don't know if that's a talent. Obviously, it's a talent that could be developed, but perhaps they don't have those skills, and maybe it comes through in their interviews and they don't get accepted to a single medical school. You hear about this all the time. That is what, in my opinion, that is what makes a good physician. Okay, and I want to take a little tangent here. I want to talk about some data that has to do with people that are admitted to medical school based on their GPA, which is in the United States, that's how someone with a high GPA has good grades. A 4.0 is a perfect GPA. And MCAT scores. This is data from the Association of American Medical Colleges, the AAMC, based on race. All right. So people make this argument. They'll be like, oh, black or Native American or Asian people, they, compared to white people, they're accepted with worse scores to medical school, worse, like lower scores than white people. And if you look at the AAMC data, that is true. Okay, so I'm reading off some of the data right here. So you have so looking at GPAs, you have Native Americans, a mean GPA. Honestly, they should report the median GPA because the mean is skewed by extremes. Anyway, Native American mean GPA is 3.3. This is people that are accepted matriculants to U.S. medical schools. So Native American is 3.3, Asian 3.6, Black or African American is 3.35, Hispanic is 3.47, white is 3.6. Okay, MCAT scores. So the mean MCAT score for Native American 3.49, Asian 3.79, Black or African American 3.55, Hispanic 3.64, white 3.78. So from that data from AAMC, which by the way, this is the means and standard deviations are calculated on 62,000 applicants, and this is this is from last year. This is 2021 and 2022. So this is recent data that I'm reporting back to you. So people are like, oh, it's affirmative action, etc., whatever. Here's my point. So it's true. If you look at that objective data, it would appear that there's a lower standard for non-white people getting accepted to medical school. This is my point. GPA and scores do not make good doctors. Okay, all of those scores I just told you are perfectly acceptable scores of people that are perfectly intelligent to be doctors. We're not lowering the standard of care. Physicians need to be well-rounded individuals that have diverse experiences. So to make the argument that you're accepting people that you're targeting and you have race selective policies, and they may be race selective. I'm not denying that they're not. I believe medical schools clearly are race selective with who they admit to medical school, meaning they're trying to favor non-white people. But what do we mean by favor non-white people? Mostly white people are still getting matriculated. It's mostly white people, but I believe medical schools do make an effort to have non-white people be accepted over some white people. That is my speculation. I don't have proof of that, but I believe that is what's happening, and I support this practice. I absolutely support this practice. Medicine needs more diverse backgrounds, not just diversity of skin. Okay, I mean, I think we should have diversity of skin as well, of course, but we need people of different backgrounds, different cultures, different life experiences that bring that richness to the field of medicine and bring that to the profession. So just my whole point with this tangent here is scores do not translate into being a good doctor. And by accepting students with less scores, not as high scores, is not lowering our standard of care as like an affirmative action thing, and that we're lowering the quality of physicians that come into medicine. I would much rather have a doctor with diverse experiences than a doctor that got perfect scores, assuming they're obviously need to be competent. You can't lower the standard of competency as well. Anyway, what was my point? So that was just a tangent. My point is, I forgot where I'm going with all this. I started out saying it's your intern year where you learn to be a doctor. It is not the MCAT that you took. It is not medical school where you learn to be a doctor. It is intern year, and the growth is phenomenal. Okay, so backing up, I'm talking about medical education here. So you're getting your actual medical education while you're an intern and while you're a resident. So residency happens after your intern year. You are now going into whatever residency you've chosen to go into. Whether for me it was anesthesiology, for someone else it can be dermatology, whatever it is. That is where you're learning your craft finally during residency. You're not jumping from one random rotation to another. You may be doing different rotations, but it's all within the same field. And that is actually where you're learning and you're training to finally be a doctor in what you're doing. And now you're getting paid a salary, which is a livable salary. It's a perfectly fine salary. There's kind of this argument that residents need to be paid more. I think they do need to be paid more. I think it's extremely cheap labor for a hospital. They're also getting like $100,000 per resident from the government. Right. So, to pay for, their employment package and their salary and stuff like that. I do think residents need to be paid more. I do, however, on that point, I'm not a fan of people in medicine and physicians and residents making the point that like, that they're so oppressed that they're, they need a better wage and stuff like that. And they make a false equivalency with other people that have the same salary. Like a resident can make anywhere in the United States from like $50,000 to I don't know $70,000 a year. A resident making like $50,000, $55,000 a year is not the same as someone else who's not a merit resident making $55,000 a year. The income potential for that resident is tremendous, right? They're going to make more money when they become an attending. So it's just I'm not a fan of this false equivalency, like, oh, woe is me with this salary. It's like you're not in the same position. You're in an absolute privileged position compared to people that are making the salary for the rest of their lives, right? Anyway, so it's a perfectly livable salary, but your main education. Here's my point: your main education is while you're a resident. It's not while you're a medical student, paying tremendous amounts of tuition. So it's almost like there's this system that's set up, like medical schools everybody knows this. I don't think I'm saying anything particularly revelatory here. But it's like, well, so why is tuition so high? I don't know, right? I think there's many factors why tuition is so high in the United States. It's like free elsewhere, and obviously it doesn't cost that much. There's not that much overhead for tuition to be that high. It's obviously a business, and it's a profit-seeking model, clearly. But it's like there's almost like this. It's almost like this punishment up front, like, hey, we know you have great income potential, so we're going to charge you this much to come to medical school. It's like it's like a fee. It's like a guild fee. It's like a fee if you're going to be in this guild, you got to pay this fee. Honestly, that's what it feels like to me. Anyway, so my point with all of this is, so this process in the United States of creating doctors, it creates good doctors, right? It also creates bad doctors. I think incompetent people can hide very well in this system, but eventually stuff can catch up to people. This process, it's messy, but overall, I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit. It does produce good doctors. Like 99% of the time, someone who can endure this process is oftentimes an upstanding person. They're self-disciplined, they have sacrifice, they're intelligent, they have resiliency, and they oftentimes will make a good physician that you can put your trust. So you have someone through this process, and then you have someone like me, an anesthesiologist, who you show up to one day, you've never met. I talk to you for 10 minutes, 5 minutes before you go back to surgery, and there's just this inherent trust, like this person will take care of me. and we should have that trust. I'm not saying we should not have that trust, but there's this whole this kind of flawed educational process that is built up to this point where now you have this professional that's taking you back, where their experience and their training has come. It's been haphazard. Maybe is the wrong word to use. I think shotgun approach to education is really what American medical education is. I think it varies widely across the board, and it can be better. I think it can definitely be better. Now, I'm not an expert in education at all. My wife is, but things to improve this. I don't think medical school needs to be 4 years. I think it should be 3 years. We don't need that fourth year of medical school. I think people could enter their residencies much sooner that they know they want to go into. Or maybe even, here's a radical idea. If, say, someone wants to be a surgeon, like an orthopedic surgeon, maybe don't even go to medical school. Have it as a you go into orthopedic school. Day one, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon, and you go into orthopedic school, and you train to be an orthopedic surgeon right away, because you learn all these things, and often you get so. Here's a story. Okay, I love this story to prove my point here. So I had a patient who, so I work in the cardiac ICU, right? And I had a patient who had a cardiac surgery, something on their aorta. And it looked like maybe they were having a heart attack afterwards. Like they're having chest pain. I forget the details, but there were signs of it. And so we got an EKG, and the EKG, maybe they're having, a heart attack ischemia, or, maybe one of their coronary grafts is down. So I called a cardiac surgeon, a guy I really like. And I called cardiology, and we're all sitting around the bedside deciding, and the patient's fine. This isn't an emergency situation. She's talking. She's fine. And we get another EKG, and it prints off. And the cardiologist, right, who's an expert in the heart, reads the EKG, and he's like, well, what do you think? And he passes it to the cardiothoracic surgeon. The cardiothoracic surgeon was like, just looked at it, and he's like, I don't know what this is. I do not understand this. I am a plumber. And he just passed the EKG back. It was so funny. Everybody laughed. I loved his honest transparency. He's like, And the point was, he's like, I am a surgeon. I do not know much about medicine anymore because I am a cardiothoracic surgeon, which is a field I highly respect, and I work with cardiothoracic surgeons all the time. I don't say this to make fun of cardiothoracic surgeons, although I sometimes do in good fun. But that's the point. Maybe a cardiothoracic surgeon should have like 1 year of medical school, and then go right into residency. So we're not wasting time, wasting tuition dollars to do this. I don't know. It's an idea. I'm not like married to that idea. I haven't thought about this. Please keep in mind, I am not an expert in education. You might be yelling at me like these are stupid ideas, and maybe they are. These are just some thoughts. They're just random thoughts on this, random podcast that you're listening to. So don't take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is kind of random ramblings that I'm saying. At any rate, I think as a physician goes through intern and residency, they grow tremendously, and that's when they really become physicians. And what I mean become physicians is being able to practice independently and to be the final line that's making decisions, what's safe and what's the best thing for patients in all fields. So it's really during that crucial time of intern year and residency that someone is learning. And then once someone is in attending, which is the word we use for someone who practices independently, there's still a lot of learning to be done. I think standing back and think about all this, the main point is being a physician is a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, and that's why it's you must keep up to date on current literature and best practices. And if you work academically like I do, you are pursuing many different projects. You are writing in journals, getting published, and pursuing a better knowledge and pursuing, in a sense, scientific excellence. Never being satisfied with your knowledge base, and never thinking that you're at the top of your game, because you never are. Medicine is so complex now. There's so many fields. You can never know everything, and you must keep learning. So learning is a lifelong process. I think what's my whole point with just this week's episode the American process that creates doctors is very flawed. I think it mostly works, I guess, meaning it creates qualified physicians, but it does it in kind of a roundabout, weird way. And there's probably improvements we can make along the way, also without burdening physicians with a lot of debt, because that debt is also used as an excuse to keep salaries high, politically. I do think physicians should be well compensated for their time and their skills. I'm obviously biased saying that. I think many other people that are non-physicians should also be well compensated, and they are not. But anyway, the debt, being in $350,000 of debt or whatever, $100,000, is often used as an excuse, in a rhetorical, political way of being like, well, that's why healthcare costs are so high. So that's highly debatable. That's why healthcare costs are high. For one thing, it's not just any one single thing. I think doctors and what they charge is a big problem in many ways, but that's a topic for another time. Anyway, why don't we, that's kind of all I have to say for this week. Let's move on to our book. All right. The book I'm going to discuss today, was released recently. It's called The End of the World is Just the Beginning by Peter Zeihan, Zeihan. And it was, let me just bring this up here. It was published in June of 2022. It's about 500 pages. I did a brief little TikTok review on this book, and I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. So it's really thought-provoking. It's a very sobering read, and it's also a little terrifying. The crux of this book is that the American hegemonic global order of peaceful and protected commerce, which peaceful doesn't mean things are necessarily peaceful. The author argues that it is, but protected commerce and commerce itself is globally is peaceful. That's coming to an end as America loses interest in maintaining this order. If you couple that with the demographic collapse of global drop in fertility rates, we could find ourselves witnessing the utter collapse of a globalized economy over the next 10 to 20 years. For Zeihan, it's a certainty. He 100% thinks this is going to happen, that the global economic order will collapse. for me, it's not a foregone conclusion. So I'll just get a little bit more into this. So for Zeihan, geography is everything. And he makes a really compelling argument that America has the unique terrain that has given it advantages right from the beginning. There's two coasts with numerous and easily navigable ports and an enormous amount of landmass for farming, which make America uniquely able to thrive on its own. To this day, the U.S. easily implemented industrialization without it being so incredibly disruptive as it was for the rest of the world. You then pair this advantage with the conditions before and after World War II, and it's very clear why the U.S. became the de facto world power. America entered World War II late in the game and had already supplied a ton of stuff to the Allies and sucked up all of their gold. By the end, when the gold standard mattered, by the end of World War II, the U.S. was uniquely positioned to set up an economic order that made the dollar the main currency of the world, backed up by the majority of gold reserves. So with that, and incentivized to limit the Soviets, the U.S. set up a global order where, rather than being imperialistic in the traditional definition of that word, it actually ensured peaceful global commerce at a cost of hegemonic and almost monolithic U.S. power. So it really was a kind of a new advent. I know a lot of people like to talk about the U.S. is still imperialistic or neo-imperialism, and I don't debate those definitions, but the U.S. did not. It did have the chance. Zeihan argues this, and I think I agree. Did have the chance to continue in classical imperialism, meaning like actually taking over territories and direct exploitation, but it rather took its grasp off that and set up a different economic world order. So this ensuing order ushered in more global growth and industrialization and mass urbanization that has ever occurred on the planet. The unprecedented peaceful commerce lifted billions from starvation and abject poverty. Now let me qualify that. The definition of poverty is highly understated and still leaves swaths of people everywhere with terrible living conditions, which is another topic for another time. But people love to talk about how capitalism or globalization uplifted tons of people from poverty. And it may have technically done that, but the living conditions for many, many people on this planet are still absolutely terrible, and we should not be... The definition for poverty is ridiculous. It's still unbelievably impoverished people. Anyway, this isn't really a value judgment I'm making about ideology. I don't care if someone is a capitalist or a socialist or a communist or a corporate fascist. If you know me well, I don't care about ideology. The facts are, in my opinion, and I could be, I'm willing to have my views challenged on this, but the fact is a capitalized global order clearly took control, which resulted in mass industrialization and economies of scale, which never happened. To argue that a different ideology is superior in theory, it's really immaterial for me. For me, it just doesn't matter. Neoliberal capitalism is the global order, and it has resulted in relatively increased global prosperity over other attempted constructs that have fizzled out, like Soviet communism. To me, that is factual. That's factual. But anyway, I digress on that. And so if you flash forward to the 2020s, now we have two problems. We have an unraveling of peaceful commerce, and you have dropping fertility rates. Countries like China have accelerated industrialization at neck-breaking speeds. It's the rate of change that is so unbelievably remarkable. The thing is, most countries, like China, simply caught up with globalized economies and did it remarkably fast, but they've done it using the same model that all other economically successful countries have used. China currently uses hyperfinance, which is flooding everything with capital and then suppressing their labor class to create tremendous surplus, which it then sinks into everything, including the U.S. corporatocracy and the U.S. bond market. The problem is you need young people everywhere to bolster your workforce and to keep consumerism and loan markets humming along. But this is collapsing literally everywhere. As consumerism collapses, all the rich boomers of the United States are taking their money with them. And I do agree with Zeihan that it is for this very reason that the unprecedented growth since World War II is very likely over. It is something that we probably need to accept. It's not sustainable. Global commerce is dependent on American strategic and tactical overwatch. Remove the American policing and long-haul shipping collapses, as well as every global trade market, which is like all of them. If you remove mass consumption due to demographic collapse, this entire system is over. The issue I take with Zeihan here is where his entire argument rests is that American withdrawal is inevitable, but I don't think it is. All it would take is policy change of a single American president, and half of Zeihan's arguments and predictions disintegrate. For Zeihan, it's a certainty, but for me, it's not. I do think that globalized prosperity is on the decline, and so is the United States. And I do believe a new fractured world order is approaching, but it may not be exactly as this book predicts. For Zeihan, it's a fact that China will collapse over the next 10 to 20 years. It's a fact. He repeats it over and over and over again. And then he says this will be followed by massive global famine, all while the U.S. will be able to live off of its own land while asserting only regional and not global hegemonic control. That's Zeihan's main point with this book, which who knows if he's correct, right? He doesn't have a crystal ball. Two things kind of bother me about this book. I did like this book. But first, it's Zeihan's ridiculous claim that rather than the U.S. asserting global dominance, the U.S. has sacrificed itself to maintain this global order as some sort of altruism. This is the same distortion and misrepresentation you see when people try to valorize philanthropic billionaires. Billionaires, like the U.S., are playing the long game of appearing to sacrifice time and money as long as they stay at the head of the table. That's not altruism. That's just rebranded tyranny and control. The other thing that was a huge oversight, Zeihan, he never, not once, discusses the possible stabilizing forces of automation, which I found a weird omission. This guy, Zeihan, he's really informed. Wow, this guy knows a lot. But he left out a crucial discussion that could upend the entire premise of the book, which is automation. That seemed either deliberate or deliberate, because this guy, it's obviously something that he's considered. Anyway, this book was also really heavy on cultural and geographic determinism, which are concepts that definitely have their flaws. Anyway, don't get me wrong. I really like this book. I think everyone should read it. I think you should read it. I think Zeihan is really smart. He's informed, and he's a really great critical thinker. There's so much more in this book that I didn't even mention. He talks about climate change, the feasibility of green energy, specific supply chains. He really goes into detail of all the different supply chains from all over the world. It's incredible. Also, the future of agriculture and mining. Anyway, I highly recommend this book. I think it's pertinent to read. All right, let's go into answering a question. This is from TikTok, from a user, Katie Do 2. And this person's question is, what are the top questions should we ask an anesthesiologist before a surgery? So it's a very good question. So you can have as little or as much of a conversation you want with your anesthesiologist. It's usually someone you haven't met yet before, right? And anesthesiologists, we have the unique job of we should develop good rapport with someone in a very short amount of time before we, take you back to the operating room and then, take over your vital functions while you're asleep while a surgeon cuts into you. So it's a very, we have a kind of this unique job. So I think questions that you should ask are, if I were to ask questions to an anesthesiologist, I would say, what kind of anesthesia do you plan on doing? Is it going to be a general anesthesia, meaning am I going to be totally asleep, unconscious? Will I have a breathing tube? Or is it going to be a moderate sedation where I am sedated but I'm breathing on my own? How awake will I be? That I would want to know that right away. And then I would want to know, how painful do you think the surgery is going to be? What kind of pain medications do you plan on giving me? Are you going to give me Tylenol up front? Or, am I going to have opiates during it? What kind of anti-nausea meds? What are you giving me for that? Would be useful to know. And then, you can ask, hey, can I have something up front to help with my anxiety? I'm nervous to going back. Can I have something? If you are nervous about having surgery, you should insist on having a benzodiazepine up front. There's many reasons why I am very eager to give someone that before going back to surgery. I don't give it to everybody across the board. If they don't need it, then I don't want to give it. But if someone is visibly nervous, I can tell they're nervous. I ask them if they want it, or if they ask for it, I give it to them right away. The reason is, for one thing, yes, I want you to have a good experience. I want you to have as good a day as possible in a scary environment that you may have never, been to before. But people have chronic health conditions. If someone is getting a surgery, the chances that they're going to have another surgery sometime in their life is pretty good. And if they have a bad experience and they're so terrified, they may not want to come back for a surgery that they may need. They may put off necessary interventions for their health in the future because they had such an awful experience. Because anesthesia is scary for people. It's scary. So I want to make it as a pleasant environment as possible, not just so you think I did a good job, which is important. You need to have confidence in your staff taking care of you, but so that you don't have dread, anxiety, and PTSD from the experience, so that you will come back if you are someone that needs to, have anesthesia again. Anyway, there's many things you can ask, your anesthesiologist. Ask them whatever you want. Ask about postoperative cognitive decline if you're a little older. If you're in your 60s, 70s, be like, do you think I'm going to have delirium at this age range? If you're a smaller person, and be like, what kind of size breathing tube are you going to use? Maybe I should have something smaller so I don't have such a sore throat. Ask things that are customizable to you, any concerns you have. I think you should ask anything you are concerned about or worried about. You should ask it. Do not hold back. Ask them. They should easily and with pleasure answer your question. They should not be annoyed. Maybe they might appear to be annoyed. They shouldn't. I don't think it's professional. They should answer any questions you have. I sit there and I take as much time as we need to talk about anything that person needs, even if it delays going back to the surgery. I don't care. The person needs to be confident that their questions have been answered, and they need to feel comfortable coming back for surgery, because it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's not every day that you have surgery. Anyway, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining this week. If you have any questions or about anything, email me icudoctorecmo@gmail.com. I'm on TikTok. ICU Doctor is my handle. I'm also on Instagram. ICU Doctor TikTok is that. Message me. I'm at this point, I'm not able to answer. If you email me, I will very likely see your email and read it. If you message me on Instagram and TikTok, I can't keep up with all the. I would love to have the time to message everybody back that message me. But if you message me on there, chances aren't very as good that I'll be able to respond to you. If you email me, I will almost guarantee to see your email and respond to it. So yeah, thanks for listening. See you next week.